It is incredibly hard to produce a sequel to a movie in general, but when it's a sequel to a movie that is exceptional and, in my opinion, probably perfect in just about every way, like A Quiet Place, it is so nerve-wracking and almost, near impossible to even compete with how amazing an original is. With that in mind, right off the top, A Quiet Place Part 2 is a really good movie. It's very well done. That being said though, I feel like as if I personally went into this movie with incredibly high expectations, purely based off of the critic reviews, the audience reviews, all the feedback that we were seeing for this movie, praising it for being a movie that some have said, was just as good as the original. So taking into account my high expectations based off the trailers and excitement for this franchise in general, factor in the amazing rave critic responses, my expectations were through the roof, and I feel like that had an impact on my overall enjoyment walking out of the movie, perhaps setting my expectations a little bit too high. At the end of the day, I don't think this movie is as good as the first one. I still think the first one is better and is stronger in a variety of different ways, but this sequel is still a good movie nonetheless. And I feel like it helps me appreciate it more if I stop comparing it to the first one. This will be a non-spoiler review for the sequel. However, I will reference some story points from the first movie. So if you haven't seen the first movie, well, you've had 3 years to see it since that came out in 2018. So just a fair warning that I will spoil some things from the very first movie, but nothing about this sequel. But I will say the movie starts off on a really high note. The opening of the movie, and they show this in the trailer, so this isn't a spoiler, but the opening opens up with a flashback of the first day that these type of alien creatures come to Earth, and you see a flashback of the core family led by John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, and what day one of this invasion looks like, and it was thrilling as all get out. This opening sequence was phenomenal. I loved seeing John Krasinski on screen again. Of course, we know we're not going to see him on screen very much because his character tragically died in the first one, but it was so great to see this family. This opening scene, I will say, I feel like set the bar high for this movie. And I don't know if the movie itself ever quite reached that high bar as this opening scene was, in my humble opinion, as the film progressed. I honestly kind of wish they would have done a prequel based off of this opening scene alone. It was fantastic, and it really kicked off the movie in high gear. Now, every single actor and character in this movie is fantastic. Everyone gives an amazing performance. It should go without saying that Emily Blunt is phenomenal within her role. I feel like she definitely has more of a showcase in the first one. She takes a little bit more of a supporting role in this one, but the movie really shifts focus, and I argue that the real standout of this movie is Millicent Simmons, who plays the daughter, and she is fantastic. Her character is given such an incredible arc and so much room to explore and grow from where she was in the first movie. All the other supporting actors were great. There was no weak link. Cillian Murphy was a great addition to this film. There were times where I kind of felt like, is he trying to sort of take the place of the energy that John Krasinski brought? As kind of like the adult male figure. Cillian Murphy does not filled those shoes, in my opinion, but his character is still good and he does a great job acting in it nonetheless. I do give this movie praise for the creative world building, because it can be kind of tricky taking such a simple, confined, but genius concept from the first movie and expanding it. And oftentimes when they expand lore within like monster, sci-fi, alien movies, it can either be really, really dumb or it can be really great. And even though this movie doesn't go nearly as far as it could have with exploring more of this world without giving us too much, they don't give away the whole turkey, but the world building was definitely there. We do learn that much more about the world that we're in. We learn a little bit more about the creatures. Something that stood out to me in this movie, even more so than the first one, was the score. I felt like the music got that much more cinematic. It leveled up from the first movie. Granted, a lot of it is quiet, obviously, hence the movie being called A Quiet Place, but the score really stood out to me. It felt that much more epic. It felt semi-Steven Spielberg-y in a way. The pacing for this movie is good, even if there are certain moments that maybe aren't quite as engaging as some, but the movie is tight, just clocks in at a little over an hour and a half, much like the first one. So it is very tight, it's not bloated, there isn't a lot of excess space. If anything, I will say this movie ends too quickly. I really wanted to spend more time in this world with these characters, and that's a double-edged sword with a movie leaving you craving, wanting more. It is a good thing. Obviously, the movie did its job at hooking you in to leave you wanting more. At the same time, I will say that this movie did feel a little bit like a segue film in a trilogy. Like if this was already an established, planned trilogy, this movie would make sense to be the middle segue to get us to the final film. And that was a little bit jarring to me that it did feel so much like that. Like there were things that are resolved, but a lot of things still not resolved by the end of it. But we don't 100% know if we are gonna get a third one with these core characters. So that's why it kind of left me feeling a little uneasy to a degree how this movie did feel a little bit like a middle installment. And so that's why it kind of left me a little mixed on structuring the film that way and setting it up that way. Another key difference I will say is that the first one really struck an emotional chord. The first one made me cry, and I was shocked how much I got emotionally invested in this family. And I'm referring to, in the first movie, that pivotal scene when the father gives his life for his kids. That movie just packed a gut punch. And I don't think this second one had an emotional equivalent gut punch moment for me personally, and that did feel missing. There is no doubt in my mind that John Krasinski is such a fantastic, talented director, and to create a strong follow-up to his first one, because this is a strong follow-up, don't get me wrong, I may sound like I'm nitpicking a couple things, but it's still a good film. John Krasinski does a fantastic job. This movie does feel like it very naturally takes off right from where we left off with the first one. It does feel interconnected. It's very tonally the same. You care about these characters. The situations are tense. The world is mysterious, but it's great learning a little bit more about it, and you are on this journey with these characters. But I think that if you just sit there and you're comparing this movie to the first one, it's easy to criticize a lot of little things for me specifically. However, I had to take a step back and just look at this movie, because this is a sequel, and look at this movie on its own. Look at the story, look at the characters, look at the pacing, and it is very well presented. It is a very strong installment, and it is a good film. Sure, doesn't feel quite as special as the first one. It doesn't feel quite like an anomaly as the first one, but the first one was like a perfect film. It's an A+ film, so it's a feat to even try to reach that level, and to even get relatively close enough to that level is an accomplishment in and of itself for this sequel. I really appreciated the character arcs displayed on this film, specifically the arcs for the children of the movie, and Millicent Simmons, I just can't praise enough for her individual arc and her journey that her character goes on. This is really a beautiful testament to the children, almost kind of like how the first movie really focuses a lot on the parents, the whole family, but really the parents are given so many moments to shine in the first one. It only feels that much more fitting that we really shine a spotlight a little bit more so on the kids in this second one, and it really worked out well. But sitting on it, taking a step back and thinking about the story, thinking about the characters, and thinking about how it played out, taking away just comparing it to the first one, it's a really good movie. It is a solid sequel. It is an incredible installment in this series that I really hope we get a follow-up to. And I can instantly feel that this movie will just get better and better with each viewing. Now that I know what to expect, and now that I know how things work out, I won't be surprised by it, and I can embrace and appreciate what they are presenting and the differences between the first and second one, and appreciating those differences. A Quiet Place Part 2 is a thrill ride and a very, very solid follow-up to the first Quiet Place. And even though it isn't as good as the first one, it's still a commendable accomplishment as a film. It gets me excited for hopefully more future films in the franchise. And it's a great movie experience to see on the big screen in a theater. So if you are able to and feel safe to do so, I highly recommend you go see it in a theater on the biggest screen possible. I'm going to give A Quiet Place Part 2 an A-. And that's my review for you. I'd be curious to know what you think, so feel free to leave your thoughts and opinions down below. As always, thank you all again for tuning in. And until next time, I'm Ryan Bamey, signing off. Bye, everyone.